talk hedgehogs tonight. Right, yeah, we're going to talk hedgehogs tonight. I'll just briefly say what we're up to. So we're doing a project called Wymondham, a hedgehog haven. It's a joint project between Annette James, who's on the screen, Councillor Annette James, who initiated the project, and Greening Wymondham, and I'm here to represent that group. I'll just give you a brief synopsis of what we do. We are an environmental organisation. We work with the local community to promote environmental sustainability. We do practical activities as well, like bulb planting, tree planting. We do some woodland management work in Ketts Park Wood. And we also try and work with the council to persuade them to take the environment into consideration when making decisions. So that's what we do. If you're interested, we have got a website. There's lots of information about hedgehogs on there because we have a couple of members who are very, very interested in that. We've also got a specific Facebook group called Wymondham, a Hedgehog Haven. And that has 243 members at last count. I think that's right, Annette. So that's only been going a few weeks, but we're very well attended, and there's lots of useful information on there too. So our plan for tonight, we've got two expert speakers. We're very pleased to see Angie Marshall from Hodmedods, that's the hedgehog support group. They raise money for local hedgehog rescue centres, and Angie will explain a bit more about that in a moment. And then we have Helen Baczkowska from the Norfolk Wildlife Trust, and she's going to talk to us about hedgehogs in Norfolk and what the Norfolk Wildlife Trust are doing to help. After that, we will have time for any questions and answers. It would really help if you type those into the chat box. As there's not too many of us, we can probably cope with people just saying those when they're ready, but we'll see how that goes. If you think of anything you don't want to forget, then please type it in the chat box and we'll bring that up. So that's the rundown for this evening. And if you're ready, Angie, we'll pass over to you, and Angie's going to share some slides with us.
Right, okay, thank you very much. Yes, I'll just share the screen and then I'll do a little bit of talking while you have a look at something better than me, a hedgehog. Let me just get that. I just need to, hang on, I need to get that back because we were having a practice session earlier. So let me do that one. Sorry, the technology is, it takes a little while. Can you see that screen or not at the moment?
No.
Right, that's my fault then. Hang on.
Perhaps if we all keep our fingers crossed, it might help for you.
Let me just go back to the share screen. It's because we had a little practice earlier and I didn't have it in the right place. So let me screen up again and share. And
that's good.
Yeah, we got that. Yes.
Yeah, definitely fine.
Lovely. Okay then. So hedgehogs, sadly, very much in decline. And so I got involved with Hodmedods hedgehog support pretty much when it started in 2016. It was started by a lady who lived around the corner from me called Paula Pithers, and she set it up because she had fostered some hedgehogs and realised it's jolly hard work looking after them. She was fostering them for Hallswood Animal Sanctuary at the time, and she felt that really we needed more hospitals in Norfolk to help cope with demand, so that they've got somewhere where, you know, a purpose-built hospital where they can be cared for more easily. So in 2016, she set up Hodmedods Hedgehog Support, and I was on board pretty much straight away. Initially, it was raising money to get a hospital built at Hallswood Animal Sanctuary, and we raised £6,000 to fully equip it, build it, fully equip it, and that's basically been our main aim, is to raise money. But also, because I'm an ex-primary school teacher, I felt it would be a good idea to get into schools and tell them a little bit about hedgehogs and what they can do to help help hedgehogs in their own gardens. So I put together this little presentation, and I've been to numerous schools on numerous occasions. But I've also put together presentations for adult groups as well, which gives a little bit more details about the hedgehogs. This one though is a school one, so I hope you it's still suitable for adults as well. I think it just gives basic tips what you can do to help hedgehogs. So 8 small steps to help hedgehogs. The first thing, the obvious thing that so many of you, I'm sure, know, because you're keen on wildlife, is hedgehogs. If you want them in your garden, you've got to let them in. And having a small hole cut in your fence or leaving a gap somewhere where they can get through, doesn't have to be particularly big. We recommend about 13 centimetres squared, which is the size of a CD case. But actually, I've had hedgehogs squeezing under fence, even though I had hedgehog highways, it would still squeeze under small fences as well. So hedgehog highway links up gardens, and that's really important for hedgehogs because they need to be able to roam for 1 or 2 kilometres, particularly at this time of the year. They will be travelling longer distances because they want to find mates and so on. But even foraging, they do need to be able to access several gardens to be able to get enough food. So coming to food and water, at this time of the year particularly, water is crucial. We have so many hedgehogs come into the rescues that are dehydrated, and so by putting a shallow bowl of water out for them, it can solve an awful lot of problems. Last summer was dreadful because it was so hot all the way from spring right the way through. And so we had a lot of hedgehogs in the rescues, basically because they were dehydrated. So if people do nothing else but put a bowl of water out, you know, in a shady spot perhaps, so it doesn't evaporate as quickly, or several bowls, not too deep, because you don't want small hedgehogs to fall into them. Or if you do have deeper bowls, put something in there like some stones so that they can get out as well. Hedgehog food as well, leaving out food helps boost them. They will go for natural food as well. It's not instead of their natural food. It's a boost, particularly in the springtime when they come out of hibernation. They need that bit of energy because it takes them a lot. They need a lot of energy to get started to begin with, and they will have lost a lot of weight over the winter period. So hedgehogs I tend to leave food out all year round because hedgehogs are coming out earlier and earlier because they are because our weather is warming up. Bread and milk is something that as a girl I was told that hedgehogs like bread and milk, that's what you leave out for them, but in fact both those things are harmful to them. They are lactose intolerant, and bread is not good for them either. What you can feed them though is meaty cat or dog food, or proprietary hedgehog food. Brambles or spikes have a good range of nutrients in their foods. I tend to use dried hedgehog food because I don't have pets, so I put it out for them, and it means it just stays fresher for longer, whereas with wet food, you know, you want to clean it up every day, and I'm a bit lazy. I like to put out some food and just keep topping the bowl up and cleaning it occasionally. So hedgehog food, water. You can also feed them, as I say, meaty cat or dog food, kitten biscuits. One thing that does come up though is mealworms. A lot of people feed them mealworms. They love them, but sadly, it does cause them a problem, particularly the young hedgehogs. They get a metabolic bone disease from mealworms. You know, hoovering up a few under the bird feed is not going to cause them such a problem, but not bowls and bowls of mealworms. And a few years ago, that was quite acceptable practice. And now we've learned more about hedgehogs, and so we know that that is not a good thing for them to be eating. So some little clips of hedgehogs that come to my feeding station. I've just got a plastic tub turned upside down. And, oh, hang on. Here we go. This is quite a young one. This was actually in April, so it had been born quite early. I'm afraid the video footage isn't brilliant, but it's the best I can do. It's just a fairly cheap camera, but it's quite amusing to see what they get up to while we're asleep. The next thing, the next point I want to make is about going wild. Leaving a wild area in your garden, or having plenty of growth in your garden, long grass or shrubs, things where the hedgehogs can forage for caterpillars, for beetles, for bugs that they love. Dog pile is really useful as well. Places, a habitat like that will help them. They will be able to find nesting opportunities as well as food. Hedgehog houses are also very useful to have. I have one, even though quite often my hedgehogs tend to prefer to take the bedding out and go under the bed, but that's fine, it's up to them. But hedgehog houses are useful to have if you have room and you don't have suitable material for them to make nests with. But plenty of shrubs and things like that, really, really helpful. So this is a little hedgehog that I had in the making a little nest in my house. I couldn't believe how many leaves they could fit in their mouths, actually. So they're all the good things that you can do, the 3 tips to help them, you know, hedgehog highway, food and water, and having a wild area. They're really positive things to have in your garden. But there are some dangers for hedgehogs, and one of the dangers is slug pellets. In fact, any poisons that we use in the gardens are likely to have a detrimental effect on hedgehogs. We have had people say, oh, well, I only use slug pellets in the greenhouse. But sadly, the slugs don't know that they shouldn't leave the greenhouse, and hedgehogs don't know that they shouldn't go into greenhouses. So slugs can travel, and poisoned slugs will poison hedgehogs. So slug pellets and any chemicals we really need to avoid using. Another danger that they have, and I have in fact helped to rescue a hedgehog that got stuck in a drain. Somebody had a broken drain cover, and they were just putting a pot over the top of it, but they wanted to clean down their patio, forgot to put the pot back over the drain. The next morning, the dog was sniffing around at the drain, barking, and there was a hedgehog had got itself caught, fallen down into the drain, and it was a dreadful job to try and get it out. So making sure anything, any drains are covered over so that hedgehogs can't fall in them. Ponds as well. Ponds are fantastic. I have one in my garden, a wildlife pond, but I've got a shallow area for hedgehogs or any other wildlife to be able to climb out of. If you haven't got a shallow area in your pond, what you can do is just put something, either bricks or something for it to get out of, or a piece of wood, or something that would chicken wire perhaps meshed up so that they can clamber out. But we don't want to, you know, hedgehogs can swim, but they can't swim indefinitely. Eventually they will drown if they can't get out. This hedgehog is a little one that did really just show how the spines come up on a hedgehog. So this one's in the feeding station. They've got very good hearing. It's heard something coming. And you'll start to see its spines will just go up. They're starting to go up now. Head tucks in. And if it was more threatened, it would be a complete ball. But this one is not too, you know, not too threatened. It's just getting prepared. But it's a bit like a drawstring around their heads, you know. They can zip themselves in pretty much. The next danger that we might have in our gardens is litter and netting. Hedgehogs can get caught into all sorts of things. They can get caught into cans, jars, plastic bags, wrappers from beer cans. Netting is a real issue as well. If you do have netting in your garden, and I use some netting because I have a vegetable plot, make sure that it's off the ground so that hedgehogs can move freely underneath it, or make sure that it's very taut or stiff so that hedgehogs can't actually get caught up in it. This hedgehog in the corner with the blue material around it, that was a school net, goal net that had been left down, and the hedgehog was found, taken to rescue. Unfortunately, it was cut away from the netting, and it was okay. But you can see how easily they can get caught in it, and of course their natural defence is to roll into a ball, so therefore they get more and more entangled. This is a hedgehog that found a tasty treat in a jam jar. It was taken to a vet. And you can imagine how stressful this is for the hedgehog. But there was no alternative. It needed to come out of that jar. and it's out. And it was released back into the wild. But you can see how easy it is for us to leave things out, and about not thinking that hedgehog's going to squeeze into it. In the springtime, we have a lot of hedgehogs brought into rescues with strimmer injuries. Sadly, many of them do not survive because they have limbs cut off or gashes that can't be fixed. So the main thing is just to be aware of the fact that there could be hedgehogs nesting, even if it's early in the year. It could well be out and about because our climate is all over the place at the moment, and so they are coming out of hibernation quite early, and so trimming and tidying up without checking first can mean that hedgehogs get damaged. So long grass, any areas where you're trimming, just check to make sure there's nothing in there before you go ahead with your trimming, and it will save an awful lot of lives. And hibernation, so when it's cold and there isn't much natural food around, the hedgehog will slow down and go into a state of torpor. It makes itself a nest, a different type of nest to the summer nests that they use. It will be, it's a hibernaculum, and it's much cozier because they need to keep their temperature sufficiently high so that their blood doesn't freeze over the winter. Often they will find a place in amongst sticks and logs and twigs or little piles of stuff that unfortunately have been put there ready to be burnt. So once again, it's a case of, if you are likely to have a bonfire, either make it up on the night you're going to light it, or move it on the, just before you light it, or check thoroughly that there's nothing in there. If you're just burning some garden bits and pieces that you want to get rid of, use an incinerator if possible, something that's raised off the ground so that the hedgehog cannot access that, fall in it and decide to make itself a little nest in there. So the hedgehog year, springtime, they're waking up and feeding. As I say, I've had some in my garden. I've had babies in April, so that means that they were born in March time, early March, perhaps even late February. So they are getting about early. In the spring and summertime, that's their main breeding season. So that's when some of them will be travelling quite a distance to find mates. The autumn, that's when they're building up their fat reserves. And finally, in winter, they make their winter nest, their hibernaculum, and eventually hibernate. They can come in and out of hibernation, though, so that's why I tend to leave some dried food, just to make sure that there's something there in case they do come out. They can build their reserves up a bit before they go back to sleep again. Autumn juveniles, these are babies. These hedgehogs can have more than 1 litre of hoglets a year. Sometimes they will have them late in the year, and unfortunately, babies that are very small will not survive if they hibernate. So so basically, they need to be about 600 grams, if not a little bit more, to be able to hibernate over the winter. These ones are much smaller than that. So if you do find any small hedgehogs in the autumn time, it's best that they get checked out in a rescue. If depending on the weather, if it's getting really, really cold, they will not be able to survive hibernating. So that will be a time to perhaps get them to a rescue. So what you can do to help, if you've got a regular hedgehog visitor, if it's seen only at night, that's fine, and if it's active, then just leave food out and water. However, they are nocturnal, so if they're seen during the day, they may be in trouble, even if they appear to be lively. The exception to this is nursing mothers that may come out during the day, but they are very purposeful about what they're doing. They're coming out, having something to eat and drink, and they're going back to their nest. So they will appear to be very purposeful. But by the end of October, or when the weather's bad, small hedgehogs may need rescuing. These were some that were found. These were actually found in the summertime when we had a bad drought. So the mother may well have left them to go and find some water. What you will find is that if you see one small hedgehog, there may well be others. So look around just in case. This hedgehog had a litter of 6, well, at least 6 hoglets. Usually they'll have a litter between 2 and 6 hoglets. That's roughly how many they might have. So look around just in case there are any others around. If you're not sure about whether or not you've got a hedgehog visiting and you don't want to stay up all night looking, that's what a hedgehog poo looks like. Very nice looking poo that was on my patio. So I was very, very pleased with that. There's beetle shells and all sorts in it. So, well, you can see the size in comparison to that coin. If it's green and slimy, your hedgehog has got problems. But this is nice, healthy poo. So I was very pleased to see it. So just to finish off with just a last little video of various things that hedgehogs get up to at night when we're asleep. So just to recap then, the 8 main points. Hedgehog highway, let them into your gardens, let them go between gardens, giving them food and water, especially water. If you don't leave out any food, at least leave out some water. All the wildlife will enjoy it. Go wild, have a little area in your garden where nature can take over a little bit. It will give food and nesting opportunities for the hedgehogs. And the things to be wary of, be careful. Don't use chemicals if you can avoid it. dangerous drains, perilous ponds, lethal litter, nasty netting, safe strimming, lots of alliteration in there. And finally, a bonfire bed. Make sure that they don't end up having a bonfire bed.
Well, that was great, Angie. Thank you very much. I never tire of watching hedgehog videos, and really recommend a camera to anyone that's interested. It certainly helps you get up in the morning ready to see those hedgehog pictures. So have we got any burning questions for Angie before we go on to Helen's presentation? If people can just unmute and speak, that will be fine.
Yeah.
Annette?
Yeah, I've just got one question on slug pellets, actually, which I don't use at all, but I know some people do. And I know that the ones with metaldodide, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it, are being phased out and are now illegal to sell. But there are some organic, or supposedly organic slug pellets that have a different active ingredient. Are they safe to use where hedgehogs are about? I just suspect that we might get asked that question in our group at some point.
Yeah, Helen, do you know a little bit more about this slug pellets? But I mean, I would say that to avoid using slug pellets altogether. But what's your take on it?
So the ones. Oh, can you hear me? Okay.
There's feedback.
Yeah. Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah. The ones that you're talking about, Annette, are the ferrous sulfide ones.
Yeah.
Ferrous sulfate. So it's a natural compound that's toxic to slugs. The theory is that when they ingest it, the slugs actually it tends to drive them underground. They go, and that's why they're considered relatively safe for pets and hedgehogs, because they're not so accessible. But the advice that I would normally give to people is to definitely use those ones, not the metaldocide ones, but to only really use them undercover. So if you put them in a greenhouse, make sure the door's blocked off so that hedgehogs can't get in. I mean, you know, just a piece of board across the bottom of the door will do. I do use them in my garden, but I use them under polythene tunnels or in cloches that are blocked off with wire so the hedgehogs can't get in. And then because the theory is that they don't wander, they do just go underground and die, then they're not a big risk. But you know, I think that's probably the way to do it. Is I wouldn't leave them scattered on the surface, because I would worry that birds or something might pick them up as well.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Certainly they're much better if farmers switch to those as well, because the real problem is the wide scaled use of the metaldocide ones in arable settings, and you know, that's what we've supported nationally, is a move to using the ferrous sulfide on an arable farm. Lovely,
thank you.
Any more questions for Angie? I've got a couple, but if there's anyone else. Okay, Angie, you mentioned netting. We did have somebody ask us about what to do. They've got a football goal in their garden and a hedgehog had got stuck in it. Is there anything they can do to keep the hedgehog goal and keep the hedgehogs?
Well,
sorry, the football goal.
Well, if they can just raise it off the ground, maybe put some bricks under it or something like that, so it's raised off the ground in some way, or if the netting can be just brought up to the top so that it's not, you know, at hedgehog height.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And also I noticed on one of the videos that a light was shining. It's a silly question of my own really, but sometimes I go out at night. If I shine the torch, the hedgehog seems to run off. But I noticed on your video that seemed to be fine by your hedgehog.
Yeah, that was my husband coming back from the garage, and he just looked in and seen it, but I thought, well, it lights up the hedgehog actually.
Yeah,
so you can see the colour. But no, they're not. They don't. They tend to sort of just stay still actually and think, if I stay still, you can't see me.
Yeah. Okay.
But eventually they might scuttle off. But that one didn't. It just carried on munching afterwards.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that. So Helen, are you ready for your presentation? Before you start, you requested a short film to be shown. Mike has got that set up. So would you like that to be shown now?
I just, I mean, it depends really, because it does cover a lot of what Angie says.
But it's great fun, isn't it?
It's a lovely film, so
Yeah,
I'm very happy to wait and watch that. I'm just going to go and get a drink of water, but I can hear you. So go ahead.
Well, we'll put that on then. Mike, is that okay with you?
Yep, it's fine.
Thank you.
They're one of our best loved mammals, but hedgehogs are in steep decline. The secret to their survival, however, may lie in your own back garden. Private gardens can be wildlife havens, and if all joined up, would effectively form Britain's largest nature reserve. With our help, urban hedgehogs can thrive. Firstly, they need access. Hedgehogs must roam around a mile each night, so one garden isn't enough. And fences pose a problem. Making a 13cm hole under your fence allows them to move freely. Encourage your neighbours to do the same, and you will be creating a hedgehog highway. Let a corner of your garden go wild. Thick vegetation and fallen leaves offer a cosy retreat. And log piles provide both shelter and bugs for breakfast. Avoid using pesticides and slug pellets, as these can be harmful. Leave out a shallow dish of water overnight, especially during dry spells. Never offer milk, as it can cause sickness. Unfortunately, bonfires offer tempting homes for hogs, so always check underneath before lighting. Making these small gestures will go a long way towards ensuring that hedgehogs continue to roam our gardens.
Thank you, Mike. I think that helped to consolidate Angie's talk, and we'll all remember the points that she made. So thank you for that. Are you ready now, Helen?
Yeah, I'll have a go at sharing the screen and see if it works. Always takes a minute, doesn't it? There we go. So what I'm going to do is I'll talk a little bit about the sort of science of hedgehogs and where they fit in the world, and then a little bit about the sort of work that we're doing. So I'm Conservation Officer at Norfolk Wildlife Trust. And what that means is that I sort of work outside of our nature reserves. So most of you will know that we've got sort of huge nature reserves across Norfolk, places like Clyde Marshes and Hickling Broad. But the work that I do is with landowners all over Norfolk, helping them enhance their land for wildlife. And that can be anything from, you know, a small bit of land owned by a parish council to, you know, working with some of the big farming estates. And we're sort of really expanding this area of work at the minute, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. But I sort of thought I'd start with a little picture of a hedgehog. That I like this because it shows quite a few of the things that are really useful to talk about. The grubby grabbers at the front. So we've got the sort of very powerful front claws they have for digging, for when they're eating things like earthworms and beetles. And they've got a lovely velvety tummy, by the way. We often don't appreciate what a lovely velvety tummy they have, but they really do. And I think it's safe to say that they are probably Britain's most easily identified mammal. Of all the mammals we have, this is the one that you probably won't get wrong if you see it. So I like to think of them like that, you know, that most people will know what a hedgehog is. So there we go. You sometimes see pictures of these ones used. This isn't a English hedgehog, it's not a European hedgehog. This is an African pygmy hedgehog, and they're very different. They are sometimes kept as pets, and I thought it's just worth sort of putting the picture up because there are quite a few different species of hedgehog around the world. They actually are really old in evolutionary terms. So they evolved about 15 million years ago, which was before woolly mammoths evolved. So they've been on the planet a very long time, which is an interesting thing to think. They've been around probably much longer than we have, really. And this is an echidna, which doesn't live in the UK, and superficially it looks really similar to a hedgehog. It's got a lovely big nose, it's got those big front claws, and it's got the spines, which, like a hedgehog's, they're modified hairs, just like the hairs on our head, but modified. But they're actually completely different in evolutionary terms. The hedgehogs are completely distinct. They're not really related to anything else. And all the other things like echidnas and porcupines that have spines are quite distinct species. So porcupines are actually a rodent, which hedgehogs aren't. So they have a sort of fantastically unique evolution. And the fact that there are similar things like echidnas, it's what's called convergent evolution. So different species often can evolve the same features but be completely separate in terms of their evolutionary history. So this is just a bit of hedgehog geekery, really. That's the hedgehog skeleton. It shows, again, that their legs are actually surprisingly long. We don't realise that, and that's because the bit with the spines, the skin with the spines, actually hangs over the edge quite a bit and sort of curtains around the side to protect them. But they have actually got surprisingly long legs and surprisingly powerful legs. And you can also see, I think, from looking at this, quite how powerful their jaws are as well. So they really can, although they're only small, they can crunch up sort of beetle casings quite happily. And the thing that people often don't realise about hedgehogs is they do have a tail. It's very small, but it is there. So you can see it by looking at the skeleton there. Angie talked to us quite a bit about how they curl up and why as a defence mechanism. And that lovely video showed that often what they tend to do is they frown before they curl up. And I really find it funny when you I open the front door and they're eating on my front doorstep where I leave the food for them. And the first thing they do is sort of glower at you like this as a sort of precursor to rolling up. The spines, like I said, they're modified hairs. And they last about a year or so before they shed them. So they're not like cats and dogs where they sort of shed quite a lot all the time. It's a much sort of slower cycle. And I have had people ask me, how many spines does a hedgehog have? Well, an adult of about 600 grams will have about 5,000 at an estimate. And they have about 3,000 when they leave the nest, when they're small. And a really big hedgehog, and I have one in my garden. He was around last year. I haven't seen him yet this year. That's absolutely massive, and he's probably got something like 7,500 or even more. So that's the kind of rough number of hairs that they have. So what do hedgehogs eat? And this is quite crucial for understanding the work that we can do to them, really. This is a medieval manuscript, and in medieval times it was thought that hedgehogs liked to eat fruit and that they stowed it away on their spines and carried it back to their nest to eat. There's absolutely no basis for this in reality. I would just like to say it's a medieval imagining. I did actually used to do hedgehog fostering for Hallswood as well, and my daughter volunteers at Hallswood, and which Angie was talking about a minute ago. They're a fantastic sanctuary, and several people did say to me that hedgehogs will eat bits of fruit if you leave them out when you've got them in captivity. Well, none of the ones I ever did ever ate fruit. They completely spurned it and always wanted to eat meat. So maybe, but I don't think there's any basis for believing they carry the apples around on their back. So I found this. There's a fabulous book which we'll come back to at the end by a guy called Pat Morris, and Pat is really Britain's sort of hedgehog expert. And I've got a picture of the book cover at the end, so you can sort of take down the details then. And it's got a lot of this sciencey stuff in it, but in a really digestible form. Anybody can read it and understand. And it talks a lot about years worth of university research looking at hedgehogs. And they did a lot of research looking at what hedgehogs like to eat. And I think it's probably quite surprises us, because we all imagine they eat slugs. To be perfectly honest, slugs are not the best food in the world for them. They can carry a lungworm infestation, which is not great for hedgehogs. They often will eat slugs when there's not much else available, so they'll look for other things first. So in the studies that were done, beetles and caterpillars and earthworms were definitely their favourite. The eggs of ground nesting birds are also a favourite, and some of you might know that about 25 years ago there was a problem on the Isles of Uist in Scotland, in the Hebrides, where hedgehogs had been introduced, but they were predating on the eggs of very rare ground nesting birds. And there was a proposal by one of the Scottish conservation organisations to cull them, to cull the hedgehogs, which hadn't been there that long. They'd only been there a few years. Somebody introduced them into their garden. And a friend of mine, a guy called Hugh Warwick, who some of you may have come across, who writes about hedgehogs, Hugh launched a campaign and organised volunteers to go and live trap the hedgehogs and bring them back to the mainland so they didn't have to be culled, which was a fabulous thing to do. But they do eat the birds, the eggs of ground nesting birds, but you know, the ground nesting birds also eat things, so you know, that's the way wildlife works in places where these species have lived side by side for very many thousands of years. And then all the other things that you can see were sort of low down on the list, really. But it's the beetles and the caterpillars and the earthworms that they really like. That lovely long nose they've got is very much used for nosing into tussocks and crannies. And if you have got hedgehogs in your garden, if you can sit very still of an evening and actually watch them foraging about, they sort of almost bumble around going to their favourite places looking for what they want to eat and seeing what they come across. And every now and again they'll find something really exciting and get, you know, very, very, very excited and noisy about it. So, you know, any sort of beetles, they particularly like things like dung beetles and weevils, you know, absolutely great. They will forage over an area of, a male will forage over an area of about 20 hectares or even more, if they've got that much room, and the female's a bit less, around about sort of 10 hectares. So that's the sort of area that they need. And obviously, you know, there are a lot of worries about increasing development, reducing the areas that they can live, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. So this is part of my garden. I'm phenomenally lucky to live on the edge of a huge area of common land that has no roads, and behind my house is a sort of series of old meadows that are cut for hay. So it's absolute hedgehog heaven where I live. And I put this on because it actually shows, this is a really good sort of hedgehog hedge, and I often find droppings in sort of places where they're coming through. And what's good about it is that you can see it's really thick at the base, and you see a lot of hedges around fields now, and because of the way they're cut with a sort of flail cutter, there's a sort of bushy growth at the top of tall thin stems, and those hedges are not actually that great for hedgehogs because they're not giving this lovely thick cover on the base that you can see here. The bit to the left of the screen that looks really sort of tall, that's actually a ditch, and I leave that ditch long until sort of well into the autumn, so that it's a nice sort of damp place for all kinds of things to live. But these sort of thick hedges like this that, you know, hedgehogs love are really what we want to aim for, and what we'd like to see people plant and have, you know, not just in their gardens but alongside parks and alongside fields. So it's sort of, as Angie was saying, not being over tidy really. So hedgehogs territorial a little bit. The males particularly might have a bit of a scrap, but they won't have sort of clearly defined territories. You might have noticed if you're out for a walk somewhere where there's foxes or badgers, you often see their droppings quite carefully placed. So, you know, a sort of rabbit mound or a molehill might have a fox poo on the top of it, and that's very much a territorial marker. And sometimes next to a gateway you might see a hole that's been dug out with badger droppings in it, and that again is a territorial marker. Hedgehogs don't tend to do that, but if they meet they might have a little bit of a tiff. They also, you know, there is an old joke that says, you know, how do hedgehogs mate? And the punchline is very carefully. And it is actually very true. Hedgehog mating is a tortuous and rather contorted event, shall we say, that takes a little bit of a while and takes a lot of laying down of spines. And it's not hugely successful. They're not the world's most successful breeders very often. But they do have young. This is what they look like when they're absolutely tiny. We can all go, ah. They are, of course, born without spines or with sort of proto-spines that are very soft, because obviously you couldn't give birth to something with spines, let's face it. It used to be that April to September was the real sort of season for them, but as Angie says, you know, we do now have this problem with the warmer weather later in the summer, meaning we get the autumn juveniles. There's usually about 4 or 5 in a litter, and after about 3 or 4 weeks they will go foraging with their mum. And if ever any of you have seen a sort of mum hedgehog with 4 or 5 little babies trailing behind her, it really is quite a sight. I was once driving a minibus full of people quite late one evening, came around the corner of this lane, and there was mum hedgehog and 4 or 5 babies going across the middle of the road, and I slammed the brakes on, and everyone in the minibus, this is the days before seatbelts were needed in the back of minibuses, started yelling at me, and I said, no, but look. And you know, the whole cab of the minibus was full of people going, oh yeah, you're forgiven, Helen, for nearly breaking our necks. You know. So it is a really, really beautiful sight. So the other thing I will say about hedgehog mating, if any of you have ever heard it in your garden, it's very, very, very loud. I had 2 outside my bedroom window one night last summer, you know, and it was yeah, it was disturbed the peace quite noticeably. So Angie spoke very well about the need for the hedgehog highways, and I put this on because in Oxford they've actually got a citywide campaign called Hedgehogs. And one of the things they've done is they've skilled themselves up and bought the equipment to actually go around people's gardens and cut hedgehogs highways in, obviously with the permission of the person that owns the garden, but they've done a sort of citywide campaign and they've said, we can come and do this for you. Some of them you can see are very fancy, you know, they don't need to be hedgehog shaped, but I think that is rather nice, the sort of hedgehog shaped one. Some of them are just shallow diggings out underneath the fence, like the one you can see with the foot in the corner. And then the most common is, you know, just cutting a wooden sort of space through. So, you know, this is a really good thing to do. And I like the fact that they're not just relying on people doing it themselves, but they're actually coordinating volunteers that will go and do it. And I hope that we hope at the Trust, you know, we're really expanding the work we're doing, supporting community groups. And I hope this is something we can sort of maybe inspire people to do and actually sort of help people be trained to do it. So Angie spoke again about the importance of bonfires. Ernie was actually the guy that you can see in the background, and this was a campaign not to set fire to this because they knew there were hedgehogs going in there, and to dismantle it by hand and move it before it was burnt. And it is a real problem. I did a job in March where we're working with a local builder who was actually fantastic. He's a sort of small scale builder, does small scale developments. And he was building on a site in Fulham Market, which was sort of derelict buildings and gardens. So, I mean, it was a good site to develop because it's in the middle of the village and it was derelict, and it's the kind of place and he was building relatively low cost bungalows for older people. So, I mean, it was a fabulous development. It wasn't one we were going to object to. When the ecological survey was done before the development, it was flagged up that there were hedgehogs in there. So I worked with him to go through the site very carefully before any sort of major clearance work was done and see where we could find hedgehogs. And the local people living around the site had been using it for some years for burning garden rubbish, and there was a sort of bonfire site in the middle of this little patch of land. And that was where we found the first hedgehog. So that was the first thing we did, was sort of dismantle it all by hand, bit by bit. I found a female hedgehog in there, and she was all wrapped up in bits of plastic and goodness knows what else that she'd found across this site. So, you know, it is important that we, you know, take notice not just of the bonfires, but also of sites that are being developed, particularly if they've got material that's been dumped on them over the years, or got sort of hedges and piles of twigs and things like that. And the really nice thing with working with this builder was that he's really keen to make sure that the site is really good for hedgehogs afterwards. So he's retaining an old hedge line through the middle, and that is incorporated into the design because it's a really nice hedge. And by coppicing it, we will encourage that lovely sort of thick hedge that you saw. He will put hedgehog highways between the gardens as part of the construction of the houses, and make sure that the people moving in know what they are, so they'll be labelled. But we're also hoping that the people will also be given a sort of little information pack about hedgehogs when they move into the houses. And I think that really underpins something that, as our towns and villages expand, you know, making sure that new developments are suitable for hedgehogs and they have all the things that we've been talking about is a really important thing to do. And commenting on those planning applications and making sure that this is something that the whole community is aware of when they comment on planning applications, I think is another really important aspect of what we can do. Because I think most of us in South Norfolk, we've probably got hedgehogs wherever we are. I mean, I've picked up some for Hallswood right in the middle of Wymondham off is Estelle Road, is it? Sort of south of Tuttle's Lane, that area.
Just here.
Yeah, I've picked up a couple along there, you know, it's sort of classic old-fashioned mature gardens, which hedgehogs just really like that kind of habitat. You know, they're really interesting, that they're very, very happy to live alongside us if we put the right things in place for them. They actually really like gardens, they really like parks and cemeteries. So those sort of urban and urban fringe areas are great for them. The things that aren't so great are places like arable land and pine forests, and sort of, not that we have them in Norfolk, but open sort of upland moorland areas are not quite so great for hedgehogs, because they don't have so much nesting material, they don't have the nice places to go and hide up and build their nests. And particularly with arable fields, they don't have the food available because of the use of pesticides and chemicals that will wipe out a lot of the beetles and caterpillars. So really it is our towns and villages that they're clinging on in as their stronghold, and that's why it's quite important that we get our gardens right, but we also make sure that the developments are there to help them. However, one of the things we are doing is we've just applied for some funding for a project across South Norfolk to try and work with farmers to make farms more hedgehog friendly, and it'll be in a sort of select areas of South Norfolk, just as a pilot really. And that will be, you know, creating these lovely big thick hedges and managing hedges in a way that benefits hedgehogs. It'll also be making sure that there are strips alongside those hedges, so you don't go straight from the arable field into the hedge. You've actually got a nice strip of rough grassland along the edge, you know, a metre or two, something like that. That will be where there'll be things like hedgehogs will be able to access beetles and earthworms to eat, rather than in the arable fields themselves. We also hope to encourage sort of planting of small copses in field corners and the restoration of ponds. And although, you know, hedgehogs don't live in ponds, but in the countryside they do require water. And so restoring old ponds and making sure they've got sort of a gentle sloping side will be part of what we hope to be doing in the wider countryside. So it's sort of thinking beyond what we can do in our own gardens to what we can do as a group of gardeners, what we can do as a community, and how we can impact right across our parishes really. So these were the two books that I mentioned. Hedgehog by Pat Morris, or Hedgehogs, I think the new one might be called. It is a really nice read. I think they probably have both of these in the library service if you wanted to get them out of the library, or if you wanted to ask your local library to sort of stock them in if you're doing something in the library, a display or something on hedgehogs. Hugh has written a couple of books. A Prickly Affair is about his adventures sort of researching hedgehogs and becoming more and more interested in them, and it includes his sort of exploits of radio tagging hedgehogs and watching where they went across the countryside. I've put his website on there because there's various bits of hedgehog information on there, and he was very generous in giving me some of the slides as well, which were really great. It was really great of him. So thanks to Hugh for that. So I'm very happy to take any questions now, or anything you want me to expand on.
Could I ask a question, please? Am I on?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. I read, Helen, some time ago, when I was a kid, I think, about this anointing that they can do. Which seems like really strange, interesting sort of behaviour. What's the science behind that? I don't know if other people have come across it.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. It could be a sexual thing. I don't know if you know any more, Angie, than me, but everything I've found is a little bit inconclusive.
Yeah. Some people think it could be to try and avoid pests, or to deter pests. Again, as the sexual thing, perhaps it could be that. But there's no conclusive.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it is quite strange. Yeah.
The thing is, I think people often worry about it when they see it happening, because they do look like they're frothing at the mouth.
Yeah.
So yeah, making sure people know it's okay is quite a good thing.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a couple of just comments to make, Helen and Angie, and everyone else. Just like, I read recently that Taylor Wimpey have actually pledged to put hedgehog highways in their new developments. Unfortunately, it doesn't count for their existing ones, but they have made a pledge to change the fences so they will automatically have holes in. So that's some good news. And I don't know if everyone saw that Annette had put into the chat box that we are liaising with the men's shed in Wymondham to see whether they are able to put holes in people's fences. There may be some problems they need to look into with that, but they certainly are looking into it. And just a question for me really is about itchiness. So we have got a very itchy hedgehog. He scratches one side, scratches the other, goes back to the first side. And I'm wondering, is this the emergence of new spines, or is it a big flea problem?
Could be mites as well, couldn't it, Angie? They do get mite infestations. Yeah. I would keep an eye on him, because sometimes if they get a serious mite infestation, I've rescued 2 that actually started shedding quite a lot of spines, and the worry is then they've got no protection. So do keep an eye on him, and if it looks like that's going to happen, because sometimes they can almost have like an allergy and it causes their spines to drop out. And if he looks a bit bald, I would ring Liz at Hallswood and have a chat with her and see what could be done.
So look out for spines, loose spines, and if he looks looking bald. Thank you.
Yeah, don't want a bald hedgehog.
Yeah. There's also a local a rescue that might be more local to you. I'm just trying to think of it. It's Tracy at Long Stratton. I don't know if that's a bit closer to you than Liz would be. I was trying to think of any other hedgehog rescues that might be close to you.
Well, at the moment, I think people are tending to use Pact. Who are fairly close.
Yeah, they're close to you as well, aren't they? Yes,
yeah. But we'd be interested in details of the one in Long Stratton. I'm not sure if we've got those, Annette, have we? No. So if we could send them on to us, contact details, that would be great. We'll share that. Thank you. I think Georgette would like to speak. Georgette, you need to unmute, please.
Yeah, I'm on. I think the thing is about the scratching is the one thing that the general public always associate hedgehogs with is fleas. And if the cat's got a flea, they say, oh, must have found a hedgehog. And the answer to that is they're actually very different fleas, because when you think about it, the fleas have evolved So a flea that's evolved to live in spines ain't the same flea that's happy on a dog or a cat.
Or a human.
Yeah. But because they're much easier to see on the hedgehogs, they're going to get the blame for it.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else that has any more questions? No. Okay. Well, I will just mention we've been asked today to take part in an event at Wymondham Rugby Club. It's Sunday, the 27th of June from 2 till 6 p.m. And we will now be having the Hedgehog Haven stall there alongside Wymondham in Bloom and the men's shed. So just to let you know, if you want to come and say hello, we will have our stall there. I've been posting various websites into the chat box if you want to go away and have a look at any of those, including Hodmedods, the Norfolk Wildlife Trust, and our own Greening Wymondham website, which contains a lot of information from one of our members. And then, well, very big thank you to both of our expert speakers, Angie and Helen. Found that really interesting, and yeah, hope to spread your knowledge further around our group and to people who come and talk to us on the stall. Thank you for giving up your evenings. Thank you to Mike, who's been busy behind the scenes working out all our IT for us and is not showing his face, but thank you very much, Mike. And then thank you to everyone for coming along. And if you do want to get involved with Greening Wymondham, as I say, our website is on the chat, or just Google Greening Wymondham and you can join us with some of our activities. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you. It's been really
Thank
great.
you.
Yeah, and as I've just said, if the men's shed want any support with kicking off this project, you know, even if it's just how to do risk assessments for this sort of work, or, you know, getting a little bit of a launch and a bit of help with the first time they do it, then just let us know, because we are developing a new community support team at the trust.
Thank you very much.
They should be able to sort of, you know, sometimes groups just need someone to talk to for the first day they're going to do something new, and that's what we're there for. Yeah,
I think that would be really, really helpful, Helen, because having spoken to them, they're a bit concerned about health and safety.
And if you get in touch with me, I'll put you in touch with Gemma Walker, who's our sort of community manager, and she'll be able to help you. And she is really looking for, at the minute, because it's very new that we're helping this kind of work, what she's looking for is some sort of test cases of things that are new coming up, and she can use those to inspire other communities across Norfolk. And she's talking about saying, you know, she can make a little film and put that on a website and promote it to other communities. So we will benefit and other communities will benefit, but we can also give a bit of support as well.
And we'll be blazing a trail again.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for organising this, Nicola.
Thank you.
It's been brilliant. I've really enjoyed it. And
good.
My daughter's been listening. She's doing her A-levels, and I don't know, you know, I don't know much about education these days, but they have an option to do a sort of summertime project that counts towards their points for university entrance. And they do a sort of presentation and they come up with something, and she's actually going to produce a sort of little magazine all about hedgehogs.
Oh, well, do send us a copy.
So,
yeah.
She helped me put the slides together as part of her project. And
great.
Brilliant.
That's great. That really is good. Yeah. Excellent.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, folks.
Bye.